Welcome to Transcending Comics, a podcast dedicated to trans representation in comic books, manga, and webtoons, both on panel and behind the scenes. I'm your host, Tommy, and today I'm joined once again by the founders of Lifeline Comics, Calamia and Phil Falco. Regular listeners of the show will recognize them from last year's episode discussing their book, Transphoria, a trans and non-binary comic book anthology. Since then, they've successfully funded 8 more Kickstarter campaigns, including The Witches of Oz #1 and 2, the reprinted expanded edition of Bi Visibility #1, and the book that's the subject of today's topic of discussion, Aces and Aros, an asexual and aromantic comic book anthology. Full disclosure, I'm especially excited about this ongoing campaign because I'm actually featured in the book with a short story of my own, Monochromatic. The book boasts the talent of many other incredible creators from established names in the realms of comics and webtoons, previous Lifeline Comics contributors, and complete newcomers to the comic book medium. The campaign for Aces and Aros was funded within a week of its launch and is currently sitting at almost double its original $30,000 goal. The campaign should still be running for at least another 24 hours when this episode goes up, so I'd love if our listeners could help the team reach their final stretch goals. With no further ado, I'd like to welcome back to the show, Kat and Phil. Welcome, guys.
Thank you for having us. We're so glad to be back.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so glad to have y'all back. I mean, following everything that Lifeline Comics has been doing, it seems like y'all are a pretty well-oiled Kickstarter machine at this point.
We're glad we project that because we don't feel like that on the inside sometimes.
Yeah, I'm curious, how would you say the response has been so far to Aces and Aros compared to your previous campaigns?
I feel like it's been pretty similar to Transphoria and Bi Visibility, where people just really want representation and are finally getting it, and we're happy to be giving it. So yeah, no, it's been really cool in that way. And obviously different sexualities obviously bring different reactions, but it feels like a similar, I'm glad to be seen type thing.
I agree with Kat. I think it's been familiar to our previous anthologies, our Bi Visibility and Transphoria. And I think one thing we've been hearing a lot of amplified is just usually I feel so invisible. I feel not seen from the ace community and the aromantic community. I think a lot of the times there's this invisibility there that's not seen in media as often as other identities. So there's been, almost like a sigh of relief from some people seeing, which has been really rewarding, especially in-person interactions when we're at a con and we give a flyer. It's like, oh, this exists. That's awesome. So that's been really rewarding.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being able to carry this at future con tables and stuff, just to have a second book I can show and also showcase other people that have been on Transcending Comics. And yeah, it's a really exciting development. So congrats on getting something that has allowed so many people to finally see themselves in a book again. And I know this one actually opens with a personal narrative from a few of the creators, with Jeremy Whitley, Bailey Rosenlund, and Kelly Fitzpatrick, and basically them talking about their relation to the book's subject matter. Now, I think this is a first for the Lifeline Comics anthologies, so I'm curious if this is something y'all plan to do in future books focused on various queer identities.
It was Jeremy's idea, so that's how it kind of came about. But I say never to say never. I think it's great to explain the sexualities and the different aspects of it as well, especially from a personal point of view.
We gave Jeremy Whitley, our co-editor, kind of carte blanche on whatever he wants to write. And we were expecting some crazy genre story since he does such a great job of that in his normal writing. And he came to us after we had curated the anthology, after we accepted all of our submissions and said, I think an introduction, something personal and educational will be really beneficial because, he felt and we agreed that particularly in the A spectrum, there's a lot of misconceptions or misunderstandings. So he thought kind of defining the different areas of that would be a great way to start. And he did it in a great way with a lot of humor and heart. So we, like Kat said, never say never. We'll see if we have place for an introduction in future anthologies.
Yeah, I actually had followed their Marvel Voices Gwenpool comic, and I think all 3 were involved in some capacity in that. I didn't know Jeremy was writing comics until last year, the day I was going to be on Progressively Horrified. I just knew him as Ben Kahn's co-host on the show.
That's so funny.
And yeah, then I'm like, wait, you did Unstoppable Wasp in a Gwenpool comic? So I speed read that, and that was my first time seeing asexuality explored in comic form, and like it was also my introduction to Gwenpool and totally sold me on the character. So like I honestly could not think of a better creative force to have behind an anthology like this than Jeremy Whitley.
He's really good at like educational stories that also have a lot of heart. Because like Unstoppable Wasp, one thing I kind of like forgot about until you were just talking about it. Like he did a wonderful, great story about what it's like to be bipolar. I thought that was
Mm.
really, really great. So like he's really good at doing that, and I'm glad that he did the Gwenpool stuff too. And I hope to see it in print. I think it's so awesome that it was, in the digital space, but I think it'd be wonderful to see it in print as well.
As far as like your approach to assembling anthologies goes, has anything really changed since last year in putting together Transphoria as far as how you're selecting stories and like recruiting different creators to contribute?
I think just listening to people, like, Jeremy actually wanted a story called Roped In. That was like about the kink community, and that was one that wasn't on our radar. But then Jeremy was really excited about it. We're like, oh, that's cool. Let's add that one. So I think just listening to your other editors. Other than that, I don't think our way has changed anyway. Phil, if you want to talk about witches, that one kind of changed a little bit because how many submissions there were.
Hmm.
Yeah, with most of our anthologies, we see like 200 submissions on the high end, and then our witch horror anthology, tentatively titled Witching Hour, right now we had over 500 submissions, so it was more than double our high end, and that was a lot to go through. So we had to get creative and build in a lot more time to review all of the submissions and a lot more meetings with our editors to kind of run through everything, and a lot more of killing our darlings because there were so many great stories. And like, as Kat said, really listening to editors, our co-editors, because Kat and I work very closely together all the time. We have different opinions, but we kind of know each other's opinions and strengths and weaknesses. But like working with Jeremy on Aces and Arrows, he brings a very different perspective that we were welcome to. And then Michelle on Witching Hour also has a different perspective. So we want to be very conscious of the fact that we're working with other people to get their voices, their experiences, their opinions, and to have them help us put together an anthology that if it was just Kat and me, we wouldn't be putting together. So it's been cool. We really, curating the anthology is the best part of the process for us. We really love reading submissions and getting to like have, dialogues about everything that came into us. So I'm looking forward to the next time we get to do that.
On Witching Hour, is that your first time you're focusing on a single genre for one of these anthologies?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think we've ever had one that hasn't.
The closest would be Rainbow Canvas, which was all romance stories, but like, that was less a limitation and more just like, oh, we were doing stories from existing properties, existing webcomics.
And there's other genres attached, like some of them were horror, some of them were sci-fi.
Action.
Yeah.
This is the first time I think we've put in a submission form like, oh, everything has to be horror to some capacity at least. And we got a wide range of different subgenres of horror and different tones of horror, which we value and we wanted to make sure that we put in. But one thing Michelle brought to the table, she's very protective of the identity of the anthology. She wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything too light that would contrast with the rest of the anthology, versus Kat and I in past anthologies have really liked the variety, have liked, having a really serious silent story about like something dark, and then, a few stories later, like something really cartoony and goofy. And Michelle kind of reined us in for this anthology. And, we think it'll have a really cool and cohesive identity because of it that'll differentiate it from our past work.
Speaking of witches, I saw that in last year's campaign for Witches of Oz #2, y'all hit a whopping 324% of your funding goal. And I was curious if the release of Wicked, you felt, had any impact on like the demand for an NSFW story in the world of Oz, and like if that helped drive that traffic forward this campaign.
I'll say we timed it correctly.
We'll say issue 3 is coming out in a particular time for a particular reason. But no, for sure. I think the Wicked hype was like finally boiling over, like at that time when that first movie came out. I think people like me who've been like huge fans of Wicked for like over a decade were feeling that hype like all year, all of 2024. I lost track of the years, all of 2024. And then like, I think the rest of the world caught up as soon as like that opening weekend came and everyone was like, oh, it's good. Like the movie is good. So that really helped our campaign, which we were thankful for. And we were glad that we had done an issue 1 before the Wicked hype settled on like, the rest of the world, we
Because then
really
you're
want
proving
to.
you made it to people that don't know Kickstarter as much.
Exactly, yeah. We wanted to establish this series, this world, our take on the characters before the Wicked hype set in, and then it's like, okay, let's actually coast on that Wicked hype a little bit. Let's use that to pick up new people we otherwise never would have reached. So
Because
that
that's
was
something we saw at Comic Cons, or at least Prides, not Comic Cons. Because Comic Cons, people kind of know how comics work, but Prides, people don't know as much how comics work. So people are like, that's like your fan fiction, right? I'm like, no, no, no. A, it's like a very different story. It's public domain. Like we don't use the Wicked characters. So yeah, that's been interesting to hear from that perspective. And that's why the issue 2 is so important. Be like, no, this is like our own version of this, you know?
On Pride and Oz, like, one of the things I've enjoyed learning about that world from other comic creators inspired by it is just like Ozma of Oz as the original trans icon character. And like, any chance we might get some kind of rep there for issue 3?
I think we could say here that we have something very, very
This is
big
a
coming
scoop.
out. This is a scoop that we
Ooh.
actually have her own book coming out, written by a trans writer that you might have known from Transphoria. So, yes, that is the scoop.
Okay.
We've been working on that very hard in the background. I've always been a very big fan of like the Oz novels, and the trans allegory for Ozma is like so like explicit, so like on the page, that as soon as we saw the success of Witches of Oz, we knew we wanted to do more in the Oz space. And after Transphoria and all the success and love we saw with that, we were like, oh, like this is a synthesis of these two properties that we love, and we're really excited for that. It's going to be a one shot. I think in the fall we're targeting to release. So
Our own take on it, and we just help scope the story. We'll say, I mean, it's Dan who wrote the story.
Dan Falco, who's my brother and the co-editor of Transphoria, is the lead writer on the book. And then, like Kat said, we all plotted it together, and then Dan ran with it and did all the writing, and it's we're really excited for it.
Now, you mentioned having a presence at Pride booths before and coming up soon here. I'd be curious to hear what that's been like for y'all as a comic book publisher, like what your presence at Pride is like and what the reception there is compared to, say, like at Comic-Con or other related events.
I think the similar Venn diagram is that when you're at Comic-Con, you have a lot of different comics out, but there's not a lot of queer comics a lot of the time. So they're like, queer comics, that's awesome. So pretty much the same thing with Prize, where it's like queer comics, but it's like also comics. That's so weird. So I think open arms for sure. That's why we love doing them.
We get a lot of like a lot of like, I can't believe this exists at Prize, which is always like really rewarding to see. We love all in-person events because we get a chance to connect with different people. I think Pride, you get more direct appreciation for the queer representation that we're doing, which is always really rewarding.
Have you found any other unique spaces where you might be like the only comics people present as far as vending at events?
Let me think about that, because I would say mostly Prides, and then we do Comic Cons. We've done a horror convention, but I don't know if that we only did one of those, and I feel like it's still the same vibe though. Like even if it wasn't comics, it felt like comics.
Yeah, it was a smaller event. It wasn't one of our best events. I'd love to try other horror shows another time, because I think we were the only comics there. If we weren't, then there were definitely not a lot. We've done school events. Like most of them are kind of under the guise of a Comic-Con or a Pride of some sort anyway, but they feel like
the
they have a
library
different...
convention too, but that also has a big comic presence, and we haven't done it yet. We're doing that at the end of the month. So that's the first time we're doing the library conference. We've done we didn't exhibit there, but we went to the licensing expo at Las Vegas. That was really fun because it was cool to do an event where we weren't boothing and we didn't really have anything attached to it. We were just like, oh, we're going. We knew Sam from Kickstarter was going. Let's just like hang out and like have a good time. And that was like the most relaxing convention I've ever been to in my life. Where it's like, we got work done, slept in, watched a movie. It was crazy. Like that never happens when you do it. Like we went to Boston last week, and the only reason we went to go see a movie and went out to dinner is because Julius, Phil's fiance's cousins lived in town. So we're like, we should like be social, you know.
Usually we're ready to drop dead after an event day, but that day we thankfully had a few extra hands, and we were able to go to a movie and have a nice time.
I vented at a video game music convention this year in Minneapolis.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I think I was the only comic present, but it was great, like, getting to hear orchestras play video game music just down the way across the vendor hall. And, like, I'm trying to bring comics into music festival spaces. And surprisingly, even at the small ones I've been to, I've not been the only comic there, I think, since so many musicians like to have something like that representing their work. But I do love finding any opportunity I can to bring comics into a space they aren't already. So yeah, hearing about this at Pride, like, that's something I'm aiming towards as well, but I'll have to keep a lookout for, like, yeah, library conventions and school events.
We do some events with like the New Jersey Equity Alliance, which is like an organization that promotes diversity and inclusion in school systems and schools. So we've vended at some of their events where it's like, you know, a teacher retreat, for example, with like seminars. And those have always been really rewarding. You get to connect with teachers who are always the best people in the world. And
Yeah, and also they treat you so well, honestly. Like we've
they
gotten
roll
like
out the red
free
carpet.
steak and salmon dinners, like free alcohol if we want in. I'm like, damn, that never happens. So
At a Comic-Con, you're lucky if you get like a chair.
yeah, exactly. Sometimes you
A
don't.
chair that's not like squeaking on you or falling apart. And here we got like steak dinner.
You mentioned that you received, like, a record number of submissions on the Witching Hour anthology, which begs the question for me, like, I know when you publish someone's story that people still get to retain the rights for those, and obviously people who don't make it in get to retain the rights for those as well. So I'd love to hear about, like, some outstanding cases of, like, what you've seen come of stories that have been published in your previous anthologies, as well as ones that didn't make it in, if you're allowed to share those.
Yeah, no, I've just seen expansions of stories a lot of times. Like I think we could say one of the stories in Transphoria we know is expanding to another thing. So we get to see that a lot. Other stories, yeah, that haven't made it, they either they publish it there on their own or they make a bigger thing out of it. It's happened definitely a lot, and that's something I want to state. Something we like doing is to give the rights to creators because like a lot of times big time publishers don't always do that, or they take the way rights for like 5 years or whatever. Is like no, you could do whatever you want for the story. That's something that we do differently. Like besides the story itself, we have rights for like a year or two to just publish that story. But let's say you want to make another comic out of it, like go ahead. We give you the right to do that. And I feel like there's very little publishers that do that. It's like usually the publisher owns the character. We do not own the character. We just own that one story that you can even reprint after a while, you know? So we really try to make it as fair to the creator as possible, as creators ourselves.
We've all seen or heard or experienced getting kind of screwed over by a publisher who's like, you know, really hoarding everything to themselves. And, you know, we very much don't want to be that. We want to, you know, put these anthologies out and be able to print them, be able to enjoy a brief window of exclusivity of the stories before you could take it elsewhere and then just, you know, be able to continue to print after. But, you know, it's always our goal to benefit us, but also benefit all our contributors. And like Kat said, there's one Transphoria contributor who we know is going to make their own comic based on the story they featured in Transphoria. And then off the top of my head, I know of two creators who were not accepted their submissions to our anthologies who either have already or plan to go ahead and make their book into its own comic expanded. So that's always really rewarding to see. We always encourage people to, you know, tell us when you do that. We'd love to share that, whether you made it into the book or not. It's always like really cool to see people take an idea that whether it originated from brainstorming our submission form or you took a shot with an existing idea and put in our submission form. We always love seeing what people how they realize them.
As for other upcoming anthologies, do you have any idea what your next, like, queer identity focused one is going to be about? And if it's going to be something new or revisiting one of the previous subjects?
I'll say the one we have three most likely, and thought we literally were talking about today. Like, what are the anthologies we're doing? I don't know if I want to, you know, shout out which one we're doing, but I will say the one we are doing is an old, like something that we have done. We're revisiting it. So that's, and we have another fun one that I think a lot of queer people are gonna like. So that's like we call it our like, what did you call it today?
I think I called it our wild card because
wild card one.
It's like Kat said. I think a lot of queer folks will enjoy the topic of the anthology, but it's not exclusively queer. It's a topic that queer people tend to really enjoy, especially queer women. And then, like Kat said, we'll be doing a new volume of a previous anthology in June, probably for our big June anthology, and then towards the end of the year, we'll have one more anthology for this. We're talking about 2026 now, so we have Witching Hour coming
We
out in
plan
fall.
out pretty far.
Yeah. So, no, we're trying to do 3 a year. We think that's a good number for us, and it helps us to be the anthology people and get to work with a lot of cool people, but also get to put out our own comics.
As for your other campaigns for this year, what do we have in the immediate future coming up?
A lot of Ever Afterverse. We want to really finish those arcs because we have something really, really big coming up, which we spoiled in other places. So we'll say here, we're doing a crossover with the books. So yeah,
This
that's
is
our big thing we're planning.
our mature shared universe of books. They're all like mature takes on like Snow White and Belle and Beauty and the Beast, excuse me, and like the Witches of Oz is part of that, and then we have like a Sleeping Beauty, The Little Mermaid, etc. So our takes on those, and then we're building towards a big crossover. Like we said earlier, we have our Ozma one shot coming out, also in that universe in the fall. The Witch Anthology we're really excited for. Definitely wanting to continue some of our existing series, our Save for Work series. Mob Princess was one we launched last year. That is Kat's baby, and we're excited to continue that one. Our detective book that we're really proud of, The Last Case of Devin and Taylor, should be launching in the fall, hopefully coinciding with Ozma. So we usually have 2 campaigns running at the same time. Not always, like right now we don't, but we try, like Kat said, we tend to plan our slate in advance. So we're trying to do a mix of new stuff and then continuing our existing series.
Last time I had y'all on the show, it was brought up how, like, specifically with Kat, whenever you see a new movie or read a book or a submission, you have some initial thoughts of your own, but you also have a second set of maybe more objective reviewer-focused thoughts as Comic Uno. So I was wondering if the Comic Uno version of Kat, like, of your own past books, which ones do you think Comic Uno Kat would be the harshest on, and which ones do you think should be the most on board with?
We play this game a lot.
We play this game a lot, so it's a pretty easy answer. The most on board, I would say, is probably like Folly Daughter in the Haunting crossover is something we always mention. It's like a perfect book to us. We feel like the art is really strong. It was the first time we creatively came together. It took a long time to do as well. Like it took a long time to write it. So
it's a one shot, so it's a one and done, which is really tight, which is really cool. Comic Phil agrees with Comic Uno. I think that's one of my picks. We got to hear what you're harsh on now.
I would say the early years of like Folly Daughter, just because it's my first comic. I think everyone kind of looks back at their first comic and be like, I would have done this differently. And I wrote it in college. Like I'm 30 now, so I wrote that book in college. So I think I would redo some of like the issue 1s to like 5, I would say. And then after that, I feel like I was finding my voice as a creator a little bit more. But it's the first time I did a comic. So I think that is one I would probably critic-wise be like, oh yeah, there's things you could have changed and things you could have done. But yeah, we do it for every book, honestly. And you know, we always after we finish an issue, is like, is this a 5-star book? With Comic Uno, give this a 5-star, and if it's not, why? And you know, like some of the Ever Afterverse, there's like one Ever Afterverse book, and I don't remember what it was, and we're like, oh, I'd give it a 4.5, and we're like, why? And it's like it's just one of those issues where it's a perfect point A to point B, and you need the point A to point B, but you can't always have a 5-star book. It's impossible because you got to have the transition issues. So it's like, yeah, it's a 4.5. Like there's no way you can make it 5-star because you need this issue because the next issue will be 5-star. You need this to get that next issue to be 5 stars. So I've realized that more as a creator because I think as a critic, like you're reviewing comic, it's like, is every comic going to be a 5-star issue? Rarely, honestly. You can even have the best books like Saga is a masterpiece, but not every issue of Saga is great, you know, or gonna be 5 stars because you need those necessary like in between issues to kind of get to those bigger moments.
We always do the Comic Uno sniff test. We're like, okay, is this, if it's not 5 stars, is it at least a 4? Is it a 4.5? And what can we change to get that point? So we always try to look at it from the critical lens when we're putting these books together, and it helps that Kat has this split personality that we can lean on.
Always. Comic Uno and Kat, they're great. They're 2 great people.
Have there been any movies this year where there's been a big divide between what Everyday Kat and Comic Uno Kat thought?
Ooh.
I'm pulling up my letterbox.
Yeah, I know, me too, right? Because there's one movie in particular that I think Kat and Comic Uno both agreed on, and that was Final Destination. Like, I love that movie and as like a nostalgic love, but I also think it's a perfect movie. Like, I think it's a perfect horror movie. It's a perfect relaunch to a franchise. Like, I think Comic Uno and Kat agree on that. I'm also looking at my letterbox to see if there's something maybe in The Materialist. Materialist is one that Comic Uno and Kat would disagree on. Like I think Kat, on a personal level, really, really likes. But Comic Uno he sees like some of the falters of the scripts. Like there's big commentary about love, and it's a really interesting commentary. And as a cat, I really enjoy the commentary. But as Comic Uno is like, but what's the thesis statement? Like, where does it go from here? And I don't know if it's a clear cut answer. And that was something we actually like had a long conversation about, me and Phil, when we exited the movie. We're like, oh, but like, was it a great movie? It's like, I don't know, but I felt something and I liked it.
Do Cat and Comic Uno agree on Snow White?
Yeah, they both hated it. So they both are just like, yeah, no thanks.
I was like, I forgot we saw that year when I was looking at my list just now.
It's so funny because Phil is the only one who ever says, but are you happy you went to go see it? Because everyone bailed on that movie. So Phil really wanted to go see it because, A, like our books, obviously, we wanted to go see it for that reason. But then also, he's like, don't you want to just laugh? And I was just like, I just think it's going to be pretty bad. I just think it's going to be a bad movie. So his siblings are like, nah. His fiance is like, nah, I'm not going to go see it. And I was like, all right, Phil, I'll go see it with you. And then Phil's like, are you happy you saw it? I'm like, no, I think I could have went a whole generation without seeing it, but I'm glad I saw it for you.
I stick by it. I like my something that was instilled in me at a young age is that like even every movie has something to love, even like the worst movie you can think of. And maybe there's been like one or two movies I've seen that I've not felt that way, but like I love seeing a movie that doesn't work and finding like, okay, what doesn't work, but like what does this movie get right? And I always have a fun time, especially when it's one of those movies that like pretty much everyone's like, oh yeah, this doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, Cats 2019 is unironically my favorite movie, so like I think I get you on that front, Phil.
Real.
On Final Destination, like I have something, I really want some kind of anthology to come along that's like a horror anthology about horror movies, because I think I have the
That'd be really
perfect
fun.
real world story for this. So if you don't mind, just like tangent, this is something that came up in my real life.
Love a good tangent.
So my good friend, actually my first editor on Monochromatic, Abby, they're from a small town in the Midwest that's like literally haunted by a tragic event in their past. Like a few decades ago, there was a senior class that was making a trip to Europe. That like whole senior class is boarding a plane, as well as like a bunch of teachers and all the like parent volunteer chaperones that are all going along to help on this trip. Tragic plane crash occurs. They lose an entire senior class, a bunch of people in town. There are students that no longer have their siblings or parents around. And like the town just never really recovers. It shakes them, and like still there's lingering impacts to this day. And like generations later, kids are getting raised and like watching the news coverage of this incident, or like watching the footage of like the finding of the plane wreckage. Now, imagine it's like early 2000s, late 90s. You go in to see a cheap, cheesy horror movie by the name of Final Destination, and a plane crash rolls around,
Yeah.
and what should they show but the actual footage of the incident that happened to their town?
I know that. That's crazy. I didn't know it was like related to. I didn't know there was any relation.
Yeah, like I don't think one necessarily inspired the other. I think they just borrowed footage of like at least news coverage of a real world plane wreck, and like it just kind of shook them like, wait, whoa, a little too soon, guys. And like there's some kind of weird real horror there. Just like didn't expect to get. It's one thing to have a trigger in a movie like this, but for it to be the actual thing that is haunting your town, that's horrible and terrifying. And like, we need to give this story life somewhere. I just need to find the right opportunity for it.
Yeah, no, that honestly sounds really cool. That's already that you grabbed me personally. I was like, oh, hunt. Like that's so fun.
That is really fun. I would love to
It's so interesting with those things with the anthologies, though. Like, how do you do without like
stepping on like a copyright? That's
exactly
because we love horror movies. It's like our favorite thing on the planet, and like that sounds so cool. But we don't know we don't know how close you can get up to like talking about a movie in like detail or like referencing imagery of a movie without
because something I've always wanted to do, and Phil knows this, is like I've always wanted to do an anthology on the Beatles, but not like talking about how a song has affected them without using the lyrics, right? But then we always are like, it's too close, right? It's too close to copyright, even though technically it's not copyright. It's so close because you're using the Beatles to like sell on the point that this is what the book's about, or like you're inspired by the Beatles. Or I was like, yeah, probably won't touch it anytime soon.
Yeah, I never would have thought of that, especially in a medium that doesn't have music. Like, I see lyrics used in other comic books all the time. I don't know what the rights clearing process is like for that, but, huh.
I'll say most of the time people are like, just roll the dice. I remember I went to a panel for Brian K. Vaughan for Paper Girls, because Paper Girls is one of my favorite comics. And someone asked in the audience, and it was like right before the TV show. They were like, "So how did you get away with using the Apple product in the first issue?" It's like that's a big part of the comic, is that they use this Apple product, and it's like, whoa, that's like from the future, but this is an '80s comic. And he said, I just rolled the dice and see what happens. Like, you ask for forgiveness, you know? And he's just like, I kind of just did it.
People who aren't in comics tend not to pay that much attention to people in comics, so I guess it depends how risk averse you are.
Yeah. I heard it said that the American comics industry is like a $1 billion industry overall, so it's probably just a little bit
Yeah, not as much. Yeah,
small
exactly.
potatoes
Compared to
for
like a
Apple.
movie.
But kind of winding things down here for closing question, Kat, I know that you are keeping up with modern comics or ongoing comics a lot more than I am with the Comic Uno channel. And the more I'm working on my own comics and trying to get my podcast back up to speed, the less time I'm finding to actually explore and read books. So I was wondering if, for our readers, if both of you might have suggestions for like a comic series for, let's say, big two comic readers that are looking for something new, and also a suggestion for newcomers to the comic medium that like have a good hopping on point.
We were talking about it this week, so it's in my brain, but Specs from Image Comics was a book that I read and really loved.
I think it was Boom. It might have been
Boom, excuse me. Thank you for that. David
Mm-hmm.
Boomer was the writer. That's a book I really enjoyed. I recommended to Dan, my brother, to read, so that's a easy recommendation. And then if you are looking from the big two, something Kat and I both love that's a controversial event, an older event, is Identity Crisis from DC. I think it's a cool mystery. It has some controversy in it, some like trigger warning worthy stuff, but I think it's something you could really talk about, which I don't know if you get a lot from events in comics more recently. I think like that there's a lot of opportunity for debate, so I think that's a really cool one if you want to read it with a friend and have a little comic book club.
Yeah, and I think a comic that if you're ingrained in comics, you're just literally looking for a comic, Runaways, Rainbow's run is one of my favorite comics of all time. And it's finally come back, and it's a mini series, but you know, obviously she wants to write more. So like read it so we could get more, because that is like legit one of my favorite comics. And it was when I was thinking, like, is there a comic I would give 5 stars each time? It might only be that one. I don't know why. It's just like I love that comic, and it just could do no wrong for me. And then if you're looking for jumping on points, all the absolute titles that DC is really, really easy to jump on right now. And a lot of them are great. And I know a lot of people just found their favorites, and they're all different favorites. Like some people love Absolute Superman. Other people love Absolute Martian Manhunter. My personal favorite currently is Absolute Green Lantern. I think that's a really cool spin on Green Lantern. So I recommend all the Absolute titles coming out right now if you're looking to jump into comics and have never touched a DC or Marvel comic.
Yeah, Absolute Wonder Woman is like the one DC book I'm trying to keep up with on their app. And like, as I was listening to a podcast covering like creators in the industry saying their favorites last year, it was like Absolute Wonder Woman and the newer Ultimates run over and over again. And I've been very pleased with both. So yeah, I think I would agree with that assessment. And Absolute in general is just killing it right now.
Yeah, honestly, I just love all the alternate universes stuff, like Ultimate Spider-Man. Like, if you're looking for a Spider-Man, go read Ultimate Spider-Man, you know? But there's a lot of good comics out there, and it's funny because, like, how do I keep it, like, how do I do it every week? Literally, I have to take all of Wednesday off pretty much to read them all, because I tell Phil, like, all right, this is the day where we just, like, we don't
Wednesday is
talk, we
sacred.
don't look at the emails. Yeah, Wednesday's sacred, just to read comics. So obviously, like, I'm reading it for my own enjoyment, but also, like, it's good to keep up to date too. So like it's work, but then also it's like I'm reading comics for fun, you know?
Do you often find like, I know there's been a few times, especially before I really got started writing comics, that like finding a kind of mediocre, especially indie comic was like one of the most important things I could have done, just because like I saw all of the mistakes I would have made if I just went right into this without doing my research. Is that something like, now that you're still keeping up with comics, you find on a regular basis of like, oh, I'm learning things or I'm finding the mistakes I need to avoid?
I think I learned that everyone has a different preference, because like if I find something really good, someone else can be like, that was the worst thing ever because of this. And then I might find something not as great and be like, oh, I really didn't enjoy this because this and that. Someone could love it. So I think that's what I mostly learned is that art is art, and like I might like something but other people won't, and then I might dislike something and everyone loves it. So I think that's more what I'm learning, because I think if you read comics enough and you've been writing comics, you kind of know the really mistakes, like the juvenile mistakes. And I'll say for the most part those people aren't publishing in the direct market. Like you might get that from like a newer creator on Kickstarter, be like, oh, that was printed wrong. But for the most part, it's more what I like or dislike, my personal preference.
Anything else you'd like listeners to know about Aces and Aros before we wrap up here?
Back it, right? Go support it. Though we can make more of these comics. Our friend Michelle, who's been working on the Witches Anthology with us, gave us like a tip and note when we do conventions. Cause it's like, oh, after someone supports, tell them like this is how we continue to do it. Because that's true. Like I never really think about that, but it's like the more you invest in companies like Lifeline Comics or Space Between or Bad Bug, you get to make more comics like this, and you're helping the mom paws of comics. So like if you want more queer comics, go support queer comics.
Yeah, we were able to make Aces and Arrows because Transphoria was so successful. We were able to make Transphoria because Spy Visibility was so successful. So, we're telling the stories that we love and that we know need to be out in the world. And by supporting these books, you're helping to make sure more of them happen. So go support Aces and Arrows, Asexual, Aromantic stories. We are funded. We have, I think, 2 more stretch goals to unlock, including, I think, an audio commentary and another bonus for all of the contributors who already unlocked 1 bonus. So, we want to get as much money in the pockets of our contributors as possible and, get as much money to make the book as possible and put it out into the world. So your support means something.
And where can our listeners find you so we can follow your campaigns going forward from here?
At Comic Uno for me, also lifelinecomics.com to find all our old books and buy and purchase the books. And then also our newsletter, Lifeline Comics, Cat and Phil Comics. That is something we update every 2 weeks with a long newsletter. We update everybody with what campaigns are coming up. If you could only follow one thing, I recommend following that newsletter.
Great. And you can find me at Phil Falco Writes on all of the major social media, and then echo what Kat said about our lifelinecomics.com and the Lifeline newsletter.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Kat and Phil, for taking the time to come on the show and putting together such an incredible anthology. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Lifeline Comics has to share with us over the coming months.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
If the listeners at home have requests or recommendations for comics or creators you'd like us to cover in the future, you can send them our way on social media. You can find us on the Transcending Comics Instagram and Facebook page, on Twitter's at Transcend Comics, on Blue Skies at Tommy Trimbath, or email us at transcendingcomics@gmail.com. We'd like to thank you again for giving our podcast a chance, and give a special shout out to Ray Day Parade for designing our logo. Our intro and outro music is A Little Soul and You've Been Starring by Carlson. You can check out more of their music on carlson.com. Join us again next time as we continue transcending boundaries and exploring the colorful world of trans, non-binary, and genderqueer representation in comic books of all kinds. As the curtains fall on this episode of Transcending Comics, remember that comics have the power to inspire change in countless worlds, including our own. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep transcending.